Welcome to day 35 of learning how to throw on a potter's wheel. This week I've been making some nice side plates. As you can see here, I've trimmed it all up nicely, as well as carved in a foot. For this I used 500 grams of stoneware clay, and it was a little bit too thin. I think there's going to be issues with potentially the plate warping. So I want to make sure that I dry it out really slowly over the next few days. You can see here my designs and my sketches for this vessel. So I was aiming for something around 19 by 4 and I used 500 grams of clay. I actually made 2 plates this week, and the first one that I made was even thinner, which meant I had to build in a foot and add that to it later after I'd thrown it and trimmed it. And to show you that process, I've created a short which is on my main channel, so have a look through my shorts under tutorials and you should see that there soon. So I hope you enjoy the video. I'll take you through all the steps and the processes, from wedging the clay through to throwing and trimming the clay, and also the drying out process, which is really important when you're making plates. So sit back, enjoy, and if you like content like this, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe. And if you have any tips on how you think I might be able to improve my own pottery skills, please leave me a comment below. So we've got our 500 grams of clay weighed out. It's going to be quite a small plate, and with shrinkage, it'll get down even smaller. So we're looking like a dish or something like that to put your tea on, or a small little side plate. So I'm going to throw this onto the wheel. We're going to begin coning and centering, and then we'll look at how to open up the plate, which is slightly different to how you'd open up a bowl or a vase. So let's take a look. Throwing a plate is one of my favourite forms to throw on a potter's wheel. I think it's because it's really challenging, and with the vessel being so thin, it doesn't leave a lot of room for margin. The plate really has to follow some very clear steps to dry it out so that you end up with something that's usable and doesn't warp. So now I've got the clay centered on the wheel, what I want to do is open it up. So I'm going to press my thumb down into the wheel, and usually I'd pull it about 3 centimeters out, compress the base, and I'm ready to pull. Whereas with the plate, I'm going to press it down and continue to extend it further so that the walls, rather than them remaining like that, they kind of flop open into that nice bowl, or sorry, plate shape. So I'll zoom you in and you can take a look at how I'd open that up. So there are a couple of ways to create that plate shape. The first one here is opening it up and then pulling it out with the thumb. Another option is to take a wooden bat or a wooden dowel and to press it onto the clay and slowly push it out. Now that I've got that plate shape, all I need to do is compress the base, ensuring that the inside of the plate is nice and even and flat throughout, and then just tidying up the rim, and we should be good to go. Compressing the base is really important. It ensures that the clay is really hard and strong. If you don't end up compressing the base, particularly with plates as you use them, it increases the likelihood and chance of them cracking or chipping. So ensuring that both the base and the rim of the plate are compressed will set it up for success. These are very different steps to what I'm used to, particularly when throwing bowls or similar shapes. And I think that's a reason why I enjoy the plate, because it's such a unique process and not many other vessels really follow that step. So once I've got the shape all roughed in, I'll come in with a sponge and remove any excess slip, as well as refine those corners and the edges to make sure it's really neat and tidy. I will later, once it's dried out leather hard, come in and trim the inside of the plate, but doing this process now ensures that there's less trimming needed later. And given how thin the plate form was in the end, I'm really glad that I put this time and effort in early, because there wouldn't have been enough clay for me to fix it later on. So now that the clay and the plate have been thrown, it's time to set it aside for a few days and dry it out really slowly. So now we've got the plate all roughed in. It's time to set it aside for a few days to dry leather hard. I've got a special container in front of my wheel here where I use that to dry out clay really slowly. With the clay plate being very flat, it's got a large surface area, so I left it outside, it would potentially warp. So what I want to do is put it in that box, let it dry out slowly over the next few days, see how we're doing, and I may at that stage then flip the plate and let it dry out a little bit more so that the bottom and the underside has a chance to catch up. So let's set it aside and we'll come back in a few days. So here's my container, nothing special, just something that I bought from Argos, and it does the job. It allows you to store the plates so that they can dry out nice and evenly and control that drying, but also it keeps them safe and protected from knocking. So a week has passed and the side plate is dried out nice and leather hard. I actually forgot about the plate, so usually I would have flipped it so that the base would have dried out. So I'm hoping when I flip it now that it is nice and leather hard underneath, and it will allow us to trim it up today. So let's head over to my desk and run a wire underneath the wheel and kind of remove the plate from the back. With the plate being so thin, I had to make sure that I pulled it off the bat without removing too much excess clay from the bottom of the vessel, because this would mean that I'd have less space or less clay to work with later when I come to cut in the feet. So it is nice and leather hard. The underside is slightly more wet than the inside of the plate, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. So we can now head over to the potter's wheel and begin trimming this up. Ensuring that the plate is nice and centre on the wheel as it spins is a vital step to this throwing process. If the wheel or the plate is off by a tiny bit, it can cause you to cut and remove excess clay. So now that the inside of the plate is trimmed up, it isn't the most even in the centre, but unfortunately because it's quite thin, I can't remove too much material, so I've tried to level it out as much as possible, as well as wipe it down with a sponge to really even out the surface. And once it's glazed, it isn't going to be noticeable at all. So it's time to flip it over and begin trimming in the base. Trimming is my favourite part of the pottery making process. You're taking a rough shape from some very basic throwing and you begin to refine and trim up the clay. As you remove more and more, your final vision for the vessel becomes more clear. And this is, I find, really exciting. By slowly removing bit by bit, eating down into the clay, your vision slowly becomes much clearer for the vessel that you're working on. I also really like how the bits of clay that come off, the pieces of spaghetti, whatever you want to call them, how they look and how it feels as you begin to eat down into the clay body. With this plate, there wasn't much space or material for me to remove, so I had to be really careful and really precise to ensure that there was still a foot on the plate so that it would sit nicely on the table. If the plate didn't have a foot at all and was just a flat base, it's likely to wobble as you use it, and this really presents quite a poor dining experience. So the foot of the plate is just as important as the inside of the plate that holds the food itself. You'll notice as I take the plate off the wheel and begin to tidy it up with the sponge in my hand that it begins to warp and change shape slightly, and this is really showing how thin this plate is. This isn't a problem at this stage as long as I lay it out flat to dry and that it's dried out really slowly. I believe that once all these steps have been complete, the plate should lay nice and flat and should work fine. So that's the plate all trimmed up. It is super thin at the moment, so I'm going to have to lay it flat upside down so that it will dry out nice and flat. So I'll let it dry out a few more days and then see how the surface is looking maybe do a little bit more burnishing, but that's pretty much it. So you can see here there's a little bit more burrs of clay, so I'm just going to come in and pick them off. This just happens when you're trimming and then sometimes it gets pushed back onto the wheel, and it's not a problem, you can just remove them. So I'll let it dry out a bit harder on the side, and then we'll come in with the final pieces. So here's the final piece. I hope you guys enjoyed watching all the steps of the pottery process, and don't forget to like and subscribe.